Chris Mackowski of Emerging Civil War from behind the camera, and in front of the camera is none other than our great friend Jonathan Noyalas. Jonathan, how are you today?
I'm doing well, yeah.
So we're hanging out at your Spring Institute here at Shenandoah University. Tell us what you have going on, because it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, so this is our 11th annual Spring Conference. So today we are focusing on basically the writing of the Civil War. So newspaper coverage of the Civil War, how people like Grant, wrote their memoirs, looking at prisoners of war and how they remembered their service, and how they kind of used writing as a catharsis. So yeah, I mean, our Civil War conference every year, it draws a pretty big crowd. We have over 130 people registered for today's conference. And really we try to focus on, big issues, big things about the conflict, but also in some way kind of connect to, the present day. So, my lecture was about newspaper coverage of the 1864 Shenandoah campaign and how that was used to, if you're a Democratic paper, how it was used to kind of, belittle Lincoln, support George McClellan. And of course, the media is something that impacts all of us and how we think about politics and war and those types of things, and really kind of illustrates that maybe things don't change all that much over the course of the generations.
Well, and particularly in your talk where you discussed ways that not only are the different partisan perspectives influencing it, but like the different abilities or inabilities of the reporters affected that.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a great example. One of the things I spoke about as a reporter for the Baltimore American, Richard Shelley, who after third Battle of Winchester, which of course opens up Sheridan's 1864 campaign on September 19th, 1864, instead of focusing on, hey, the Union Army finally won a battle in the Shenandoah Valley, we're focusing on the moment where things could have gone badly in terms of the delay that happened as a result of Horatio Wright bringing his wagons along, following the Sixth Corps, and Horatio Wright not getting blamed for this in the press, and Shelley's blaming another Union commander, William Emery, who commanded the 19th Corps, and kind of taking that moment and looking at how bad reporting, bad judgments, bad conclusions really infects history. So you have William Swinton, author of The Army of the Potomac, comes out in 1866. He's relying exclusively on those accounts in the Baltimore American to write about the Third Battle of Winchester, and then other early historians pick up on it, and then it makes life difficult for historians now who are trying to really combat things that have been written for generations and taught as the gospel, and we come along and say, well, that's not exactly the case.
You also offered a great case study about First Amendment and how people at the time of the war understood or didn't understand the First Amendment compared to today.
Yeah, and so, we think about, First Amendment and, freedom of speech and all those types of things. And, there's not really any sort of a great court challenge to the First Amendment until the early part of the 1900s. And so one of the things I did was kind of help people understand, well, how is the American court system during the Civil War looking at First Amendment? Because I talked about, newspaper correspondents getting arrested and papers getting shut down. And really what's influencing the American judiciary at this time on the First Amendment is Judge Blackstone from England and his commentaries on English law, published in 4 volumes in the mid to late 1760s. And basically Blackstone is writing, you have the freedom to say what you want and to write what you want, but if it's malicious or inaccurate or wrong or mischievous, that's a word he used, you also have the right to be arrested and have your paper shut down. And so, we talked about the House Judiciary Committee, supporting this type of activity, suppression of newspapers, suppression of circulation of newspapers. So it is a different world. How we look at the First Amendment changes over the course of time.
Now, you've got a lot else going on with the McCormick Institute for Civil War Studies. Aside from this great spring conference, you've already opened up registration for your fall conference.
Yes.
You have some cool things coming up this summer related to Cool Spring. Tell us a little bit about what's on the agenda.
Yeah, so our next big thing is Saturday, July 19th. So it'll be our observance of the anniversary of the Battle of Cool Spring. And so this year I'm going to do a special tour that focuses not necessarily on the battle, but looks at the aftermath of the battle. Looking at the struggle for wounded soldiers and how they get across the Shenandoah, looking at the care and treatment of the wounded, and looking at how the battle impacts widows and orphan children. And so that's a free event open to everyone who comes out to our river campus at Cool Spring Battlefield in Bluemont. And then we have coming up in November, early November, our one-day fall seminar and tour that's going to focus on the Battle of Cedar Creek and its legacies. And there's a nominal $25 registration fee for that. But basically, it's a tour that's open up to 40 people, so it's a small, intimate crowd, and we actually begin the day here at Shenandoah University. There's a lecture that sets the stage. I'm actually going to open up that day speaking about the making of General Philip Sheridan, what made him into the person he was by the time the autumn of 1864 rolls around, and then we'll spend the day out the afternoon after lunch tramping the fields of Cedar Creek.
If folks want to get involved with some of the things that the Institute's up to, what's a good way for them to connect?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. So one of the easiest ways, we have our website, su.edu/MCWI, and that contains information about all of our programs. There's also a link on there for people to subscribe to our quarterly newsletter that has all of our events and happenings and goings on. And also you could follow us on social media, on Twitter, which is now X, also on Facebook.
Now, just shifting gears a little bit, we're recording this during the NFL draft. You and I are both big Bills
That's
fans.
right.
What sort of grade are you giving the pick so far?
So far, I'd give it an A. We had deficiencies at corner. That was addressed with Max Hairston. We got a D tackle and a D end in rounds 2 and 3. I think Brandon Bean's doing a pretty good job so far. I'd like to see a wide receiver maybe in round 4 or 5.
So very good. Thanks so much for spending some time with us, John.
Thank you, Chris.